Good afternoon, everyone. I am Emily Bull, DRI's Marketing Manager, and I will be moderating today's webinar. Before I introduce our presenter and get started, I wanted to go over just a couple of housekeeping items. All of our attendees are muted as they enter the session. The CPQ demonstration will take about 35 to 40 minutes, and following the demonstration, we will open the floor for a live Q&A. If you would like to ask a question, you can do so by typing and submitting your question in the question tab of the webinar toolbar. You can submit a question at any time throughout the webinar, and if we don't have time to respond to you during the session, we will follow up with you directly via email. We'll be recording the session as well, and that recording will be sent out to all of our registrants following the live presentation. Before we start today's demo, I did want to make you all aware of an upcoming two-part webinar series hosted by Infor. This series is for customers interested in learning more about migrating from their on-prem deployment to the cloud. Part 1 will take place on Tuesday, November 30th, as you can see here on the screen at 2 p.m. Eastern. That session will include a panel of 3 current Cloud Suite Industrial customers speaking about their motivation behind migrating to the cloud and the benefits they have experienced since migrating to the cloud. Included on that panel will be a DRI customer, Oliver Packaging. So for those of you on today's session who are DRI customers, you will get a firsthand account of what it's like to move to the cloud from the firsthand experience of a DRI customer. We're really excited about that and glad that they've decided to participate. Part 2 of the series will be a coffee and demo session. That portion will take place on December 3rd, and Infor will be sending attendees of part 2 a Starbucks gift card to enjoy a coffee break, your favorite pumpkin spice or gingerbread latte, while you take part in the Cloud Suite Industrial 10 demonstration. Registration for that second part will be shared with attendees during part 1. So if you have any questions or interested in learning more and registering for that 2-part series, you can do so by visiting DRI's website, decision.com/events. Looks like it's going to be an exciting session. So if you're on-prem and looking at the cloud, we definitely encourage you to register for that session. And with that, we can jump right into the demo. I'd like to welcome everyone to today's demonstration of Configure Price Quote for SyteLine. I am pleased to introduce our presenter today. Mike Stitt is a Senior Business Solutions Consultant at DRI. Mike has worked with SyteLine and CSI products for the last 26 years in various capacities and has a total of 35 years in experience in manufacturing and distribution. Mike, I think we're all ready to get right into this CPQ demo, so why don't you go ahead?
Okay, Emily, thank you. Can you hear me?
You sound great.
Okay. Hello, folks. Thanks for joining us today. This is a demonstration, as Emily pointed out, about Infor CPQ, Configure Price Quote. And we're going to present it from a sort of a SyteLine perspective, a Cloud Suite Industrial SyteLine perspective. The CPQ capability for Infor is a product that is available for a lot of the Infor ERP systems, but certainly it's nicely tuned for SyteLine or Cloud Suite Industrial, if you know it as that. Okay, so we're going to talk about product configuration. Now, by the way, as many of you on this call may know, with SyteLine or CSI, you get a sort of a basic, what some people call features and options configurator. That's included. And it's good for sort of rudimentary configuration, simple options. We're not going to talk about that today. Today, we're going to talk about the advanced, what's sometimes called role-based configurator, CPQ, Configure Price Quote. Okay, so let's look at the details of that. Now, as you probably know, CPQ is a separate purchase. It's a separate sort of license separately, and it's a very powerful piece of software. Now, I won't sort of regurgitate what you see on the screen here, but the tool, configuration tools in particular, and Infor CPQ tool in general, are the types of things that allow for option-based selection to sort of pick how you want to configure a product. And in our solution, it can sort of surface at various different points, at estimating and quoting, at order entry, even at job order production, job order processing, when you get to the production area of the process. Now, as it says, it's an end-to-end process. That's kind of what I mean there, and it's good for complex products, but especially products that lend themselves to option selection. And it's also good when there's things like dimensions that get called out, and with those dimensions, then or other any kind of selections will then have a bearing downstream on other selections, and ultimately on sort of how the system creates a bill of material and routing. So what they often say is it's a good tool to give you directed smart selling. Allows you to sell what you can sell, build what you can you're able to build, price it properly, and then as I'm sort of circling this down at the bottom, it has some really neat tools to automatically create a custom or configured bill of material and routing. And I say and routing because all these option selections can dictate, hey, do we need to adjust the routing or create the routing a little bit differently based on what was selected. It can also, by the way, do multi-level bills, which means multi-level indented job structure, so sub-assembly jobs. Okay, so it's pretty powerful. Let's look at this features just for a second. I'll let you eyeball some of the things you see on there, but I'd highlight a couple things. One of the things is that there is an intelligent part number generation capability with the Infor CPQ capability, and that's what you would think it is. It's an ability to, based on option selection, it can build an item number, a part number. And by the way, it can also do that with descriptions. Okay, so there's intelligent part number generation for both part numbers and descriptions. And that always brings up kind of an interesting discussion, because some people will take the approach, or some organizations take the approach, that we want a configurator because we don't want sort of part number proliferation. You don't want to create separate items or part numbers for every possible permutation that could be selected, because you can get it run into hundreds or thousands. Okay, so even though it has the ability to create unique part numbers, that can be either not used or conditionally used. Okay. By the way, it's a little sidebar here. Some companies will actually use this in sort of engineers to generate part numbers and bills of materials for things that they think are going to be recurring. Okay, that's kind of a unique deployment. But the bottom line is there's some neat capabilities to either have the system create unique item numbers or not. And by the way, it's also an important conceptual point to say that if you don't create unique item numbers, you still get really good data to do analysis, because all the option selections are held in options and tables that then are available for you to do reporting. How many times did we sell this unit at this color, or with these dimensions, or with this feature? All that is captured in configuration specific tables. Okay, so you have all that. Now, there's certainly one of the chief responsibilities, if you will, of a configurator is to determine a price. And it can do that just based on option selection. Once you pick something, it can then assign a price, and it can incrementally build the price. The price can also be based on sort of cost plus, because as the configurator, it's doing its thing, it's sort of capturing or building a bill of material that costs out, and then you can have the price based on that cost. Here's a little interesting thing: new line creation. That can surface when you sell something where you maybe you build, construct, or configure the main product, but then there's accessories, for example, kits, hardware kits. Those can end up surfacing, if you'd like, as separate line items on a customer order or a quote. Okay. Now, some of these other things I'll make you be aware of. I'll just let you look at. Although this graphical UI, today you're going to see in my example how the configurator is going to render a 2D drawing. A lot of that is sort of made available with a standard version of the configurator. There is now a 3D capability that is another sort of separate purchase that allows you to do some really compelling 3D depictions and imaging. Okay. And then the things over on this right-hand side, those are what we talked about, sort of a work order or job order creation, along with the routing. Here's one I'm circling here. If you capture relevant information during configuration, okay, that can be passed to the shop floor. It's like simple notes, okay? So a lot of interesting things here. I mentioned this already, but configuration entry points. Really, when you look at these three I'm circling, that means it can be done during estimating and quoting, it can be done during order entry, or it can actually be configured during job processing. So I'll circle the job word there. And what's interesting about that, we'll occasionally, it's not uncommon for us to run into companies that will estimate, okay, and maybe they estimate at some level of precision, maybe a more rough cut level, and they're using the configurator, the CPQ tool, to do that. And then once they receive that order, they convert that configured estimate into an order, and they can reconfigure. In general, you can reconfigure at the order level, or there's even companies out there that at that point, since they have more clarity on what option selections a customer's may be asking for, you can then sort of fill in the blanks at that point. And then when a job is created, there's a configured job, and you can actually even reconfigure at the job level. I ran into a company once that said they're not going to configure the palletizing and the packaging until production is started, or maybe at the end of production. But these are all points of entry and use of the configurator. So a lot of good things there. Now, let's go ahead and take a look at an example. I am, by the way, using the web client and this is version 10 of SyteLine CSI. So for some of you, this might look a little bit different. I'm using one of these, what are called home pages. And what I'm going to start with here, folks, is I'm going to go to an estimate in our system. Again, I'm in a browser here. I'm going to put my browser in full screen mode. And I'm going to pull up the estimate quick entry form here. And by the way, in order to demonstrate this better, this is the kind of the standard estimate quick entry form in SyteLine CSI. I've added the bill and the routing down here just to sort of show you how this plays out. Now, this first example you're looking at, if you're a SyteLine person, you might know there's the estimate or the quote number. It's to this customer, could have been to a prospect. And here's the data here's the line that's being estimated or quoted, okay? Now, because this item, and the example I decided to use today is a semi-trailer. You'll see how it plays out. It's an item you set up in the system. I could take you over to the item master form, and you'd see that you declare it as sort of CPQ configurable. In fact, you declare it that way as opposed to a regular item or even a features and options configured kind of thing. There's some settings at the item level that you turn that on, and you actually then point it to what's the design model that's used to sort of write the logic for this. But the bottom line here, folks, is this is a configurable product, okay? And this is an example where I've already run through a process, and I just want you to see ultimately that what this ends up doing is creating in this case, estimate specific routing and bill material, and it's also indicating that the configuration process has been completed. So it's kind of telling the user, hey, you've already walked through a configuration process. That doesn't mean I can't reconfigure, but there's kind of an indicator that, hey, this order has been configured. Now, let's take this as one that I have not configured yet. So notice the configure button is available, but it's kind of telling you can configure this, but you have not yet already done so. Again, if this button is only made available when the item in question is a configurable item. So now here's the fun part. So because it's a configurable item, I just go ahead and click the configure button. And what you're seeing there is the system is launching the configuration UI. Okay, now you have some flexibility. Infor has developed a series of these configuration UIs. Most of them have the effect of data options being displayed on the left and results, either images or all the sort of a grid of everything that was selected. That ends up showing up on the right. Okay, but there are a few different UIs that are available here. I'm using, I think, I forget the name of this one, but this is one of the more standard ones. But we're at the point now where the system is sort of, this is a configurable semi-tractor trailer, okay? And it's starting now at this point. So notice here's the different options I could start with. And notice as I do this, the images on the right-hand change. You'll notice up here that this is continue button, okay? Eventually that's gonna say finish, okay? There's also a price capability up here. As I make option selections, you're gonna see the pricing start to sort of automatically build and change as I make more and more selections, okay? So that's my first question. And when you have a CPQ model, okay, you kind of determine how many different models. Well, let's say you sell semi-tractor trailers. This is maybe these 4 are all part of one CPQ model or what's called rule set. Okay, so I'm going to select this, and now because I select that, it's going to start posing or presenting questions to me. So what's the length? And notice a little red star, that means that's a requirement. So I can pick a value here, and then and this is really the essence of what the configurator brings to the table, because as I picked a length, then the system is making heights available. If I change a different length setting, notice that's a small but representative example of how the configurator is sort of presenting to the user sort of smart option selection, okay? Now, there's other things you can do here, like with a 48-inch, I can say, well, what happens if I pick 13? That's just an alert, sort of a soft alert. Or no, that's a hard alert. In this case, it's not valid. You could just as easily say, I don't want to make that available, but the point is you can make this kind of interactive and present information to the person that's using this in whatever way makes sense, okay? But in that case, that's not available. So I'll go ahead and pick a different height. And then as I select that, notice there's sort of an incremental notion of this. And notice also there's a price getting built, okay? And you're seeing a different image over here. And there's a million questions we could show you here. I'm going to highlight a few of them. So notice what's the running gear or fixed versus slider. When I do that, it might calculate the price. In that case, it didn't. All right. Notice there's a number of axles, and there's some basic image rendering going on here. We can talk about that later if you'd like. That's kind of an interesting topic, how to render images. Okay. But notice when I change this to 3 axles, basic 3D imaging is rendering a slightly different image now with the 3 different axles on it. But that's the kind of thing that is enabled as well. Now there's a bunch of questions here. What's the kingpin selection? Notice in this case, you have control over how, what mechanisms are allowed to make choices. This is a drop-down listing, so I'll select 42 there. Okay, and again, the image can change. Now, this trailer doors option is now available. And by the way, this is what's called an information link. If you want to present relevant information throughout the configuration process, those are what are called information links. Okay, so there's a load control setting there, different options, etc. But again, I could click this little information link and it might pop up a PDF document that sort of lends some relevant information. Now I'm going to pick the door type. Okay, when I pick that, you know this, but it changed the price up there. That's the kind of thing that can take place. Okay, when I'm, I can sort of shimmy back and forth here with a roll-up door. Notice the door heights and width options are different than if I have this type of door. Okay, but again, that's how the configurator is making sort of a smart presentation of option selections. Okay, now the system, it sees that and I could override here, but the system has seen that I have enough information now. I can go over to trailer construction. Okay. Now, maybe I might want to come over on the right-hand side and change my view here. There's a sort of narrative view of what's been selected. If I switch it to this is sort of a price breakdown because there's sort of incremental pricing going on here. Okay. Now I'll just, make some selections here. I come over, at some point it might generate some message like, hey, that doesn't make sense, but I'll keep going on and you get the point. So here's interior construction. As I select this option, the options below for scuff material change. But again, this scuff material is required, so the system won't allow me to sort of present the next option until something is decided here. Okay, notice it still says continue. Eventually that's going to say finish up here. Again, notice that the price is building. All right, so now I have these other options. This is a tractor trailer. I got to pick a suspension. I'll pick air ride. Again, that's going to be a big price driver. Okay, Now I'm just getting into things like breaks. Notice I can hover on that. That's another sort of a way of presenting relevant information. Again, these are things that the modeler, the person that builds the rule set, can add to the configuration experience to make it that much smarter, that much more intuitive. Okay, so you have break types. And as you might expect, these break types will have a bearing on things like what wheels are available. And I pick a particular wheel, that's certainly going to have a bearing on maybe what tire size available, and what tire size might dictate what manufacturers are available. All of this is just configuration logic that's built into the system. Okay. Now, one thing is I think is compelling is this: if I put special requests, this allows me to record maybe some kind of commentary, some kind of note that I want to be included downstream for estimating, for sales order processing, and eventually all the way to the production job. So please expedite. I don't know, whatever. All right. But that's a comment. And notice for the first time now up here that says finish, we have satisfied all the sort of the prompts, the input requirements. Okay, so that finish button is available. I still could come over here and hit the adjustments button. When I do that, this is kind of a fun one. This is where it's kind of giving you a breakdown of the door or the base price. There's the door price, the floor price. And in this model, it's built with sort of ultimate flexibility where maybe someone that's using this has the ability to make some adjustments, either by a percent or an amount. Okay, this one actually has the notion of a trade-in sort of enabled. Okay, and if that's the case, notice when I turn that on, then it's prompting for trade-in value. Okay, I'll turn that off, but you get the point. So there's lots of things here that the system is prompting for. Okay, so at some point, the user can hit the finish button. And when you do that, the system's sort of bringing this all together. And what you have then, folks, is notice down below here, it has built a custom configured based routing and bill of material. And in this case, this particular model has also certainly built a price, and there's not intelligent part number logic generation being used here, but it did build an intelligent description. Again, those are all possibilities, okay? But this is sort of what the configurator brings to the table. So some pretty neat little things there. And again, notice it's telling me that the configuration process is complete. I could, at some later time, come in here and just click the configure button again, because maybe the customer has come back and said, hey, I want to sort of redo this, or I need to change the color or whatever. But I can click that button and it's launching it back. What's interesting at this point is it has held all those previous selections. I could walk it back here, okay? And if I did that, if I made a change here, then that change is gonna cascade and might then dictate I have to make some other option selections, okay? But the point is I configured, and then if it makes sense and in appropriate scenarios, I can sort of reconfigure, okay? So I'll hit the finish button again. Again, all it's doing is sort of closing out that configuration UI and bringing it back to sort of SyteLine proper or CSI proper. Okay, now, like anything in SyteLine CSI, this order could be converted, this estimate could be converted to an order, and that's kind of typical SyteLine CSI behavior, okay? But I went ahead and converted this one to an order. I could see that here's the order that came from this. And the point here that we're really trying to drive home is whatever you configured during estimating, okay, is now brought over to the order side. This is, again, our quick order entry form. It works with a sort of the traditional order entry form as well, but all that data that was brought over here is now available. And notice it's telling you, it's kind of as another indicator, hey, that configuration has already taken place. That doesn't mean I can't reconfigure, okay? But in fact, I could. If I click this little button over here, it's bringing that back up. And again, it's holding all those options, okay? So to the degree that it might make sense for me to reconfigure, I can, or you can restrict that as well. But I'm kind of showing you sort of the completion of what's possible. Now, there's options in the system that says, hey, if I configured a product that is configurable by nature, both the customer order got created and a job got created, okay? And that job is a configurable job. So if I went, and there's a couple different ways I could look at that job, I'm going to do it this way. And by the way, you're going to see one of the new style screens that's available in CSI 10, SyteLine 10. This is a job order screen. Now, in this case, there's the job. It's associated with this order. That's that same order I looked at a few minutes ago. Okay, but to the degree that makes sense, notice the configure button is available here. Again, it's basically just telling you this has already been configured. Okay, and I'm not saying this is particularly commonplace, but again, in scenarios where maybe you don't know, you don't have clarity on all the details until later in the process, you can still enable, if it makes sense, to do reconfiguration at this point. All right, now I'm going to pause for a second. I'm going to show you a few other things, but what we did there kind of nicely was sort of just run through the configuration process. Okay, now let's just spend a minute. We're not going to do a particularly deep dive, but let's just spend a minute on the engine that allows all this to happen, because essentially what's going on is there's what we call a design studio where you build all this logic, okay? And what you do is construct what's called a rule set, okay? So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go over to where I have that the design studio present. Again, we're only going to touch the surface on this, okay? But the design studio is intended to be a low code way of building configuration models or rule sets. When I say low code, that means you shouldn't be having to write too much sort of coding syntax. A lot of it is the idea of you have tools over here like conditions and variables and screens, and all you do is grab them and drop them over into this is the overall rule set. So when you look at this is the actual rule set for that semi-trailer, where you can see here's where you address images, and here's where you start displaying trailer details, and you can update the image with some logic, okay? But this is nothing more than a series of those rules and sort of tool options over here that are sort of dragged and dropped over onto a rule set. Now, once you do that, then there's the ability to drill into the details of these components, okay? There's a component attribute section, both over here on the right-hand side. This is where, if you get interested in this, we'll give you someone that can give you a really good sort of rundown on how the rule engine process plays out, okay? But when you look at this, again, there's a tool palette over here, and here I can kind of see all of my rule sets. The rule set's kind of the high level thing where you see the different rules. And one thing I will show you here is I scroll down on this. A lot of these are just things like there's that kingpin option, there's the load control option. It's just kind of, it's pretty intuitive, okay? There's where the flex 2D imaging logic kicks in, all right? I could trailer doors, etc. So you build this incrementally, and when you're building these, you normally build them with some sort of, you build a portion of it, see the logic makes sense, and you keep adding on. And there's a great deal of hierarchy when you build these, so that as you build it, one model, you can include hierarchy logic that you might include in another model or another rule set. So lots of really compelling capabilities, and if you go about this in a smart way, it can really allow for efficiency of model or rule set updating, okay? Now, as I keep scrolling down here, you also, when I get down to the bottom of this, you see the manufacturing branch. The manufacturing branch is what allows the system to automatically create a unique or configured bill of material and routing. So you'll see there's steps in here that allows you to create operations, and these operations can be conditionally created. But the reason I want you to see that is this is a case where over on this side, you're going to start seeing pointers back into the SyteLine tables, like that's a work center ID, okay? And so there's lots of nice pointers back so that when you're setting this up, the data that you need that's being driven by the ERP, the SyteLine CSI ERP, is also readily available when you're building rules, the rule sets, okay? So these are the major rule sets. When you look at, there's a couple other quick things over here. Matrices can be used. Matrices are what sort of matrices that allows you to, for that can be used for pricing or various option selection. Here's an area where you set up options. So if I go to option lists, there's a whole bunch of pre-built options. And again, the reason it's sort of segmented like this is you might build some options here generically that then might be brought into multiple different parent level rule sets. So there's an art to constructing these properly. And what normally we tell people is you don't necessarily have to be a real grizzled sort of software developer. The bigger bogey here is for you to understand how your product is fit together. Once you have that, then you can learn the tool set of the design studio pretty well. It's a pretty intuitive process. Okay, so you have that. Now, let's end with something maybe a little bit interesting and fun. I'll come out of there. We also want you to be aware, as if I come back to my original environment, that this tool can be used not just in sort of SyteLine CSI proper, but I could even use it in our portal. Okay, so in this case, I'll sign in to our portal, and the only reason I'm just showing you is I want you to be aware that it's available in the portal. It's sort of available in lots of places. Infor also makes a product called Enterprise Quoter available. That's sort of a general purpose, high-end quoting tool that's available with Infor, and it's certainly the CPQ configurator is supported there. But here, I'm just using the good old portal, SyteLine portal, and as I do this, notice I'll have a product down here, a motorhome, a configurable motorhome. And I'm just bringing this up. This one's kind of fun to show you. As I go to configure this motorhome, all right, the system's going to start asking me for that same kind of option selection. So now instead of a semi-tractor trailer, it's asking me things for related to building a motorhome, and it's the same kind of thing. Here's a case where that's kind of an informational message there. So I got to pick a different floor plan. And this particular rule set has hundreds of questions. Well, I just wanted to show you a few things. Our default RV. This is a case where, again, you can make the experience for the person that's using this, and it can either be an internal person. And one of the reasons I'm showing you through the portal here, this is sometimes made available to your customers so they can configure themselves. Or if you're a distributor, a dealer, they can configure themselves. Okay, so there's lots of different ways that this can get used. But in this case, there's this idea of setting a default, because maybe once you pick a Tradewinds motorhome, you want to set this default here, and that will make a lot of the selections automatic. So you won't force the person to make a lot of selections. But those are the kinds of things you can do to make the configuration process that much easier, more intuitive, easier to sort of roll out. Okay, so now I'll keep going on here. There's body features where I'm picking different things, the chassis, etc. And I'm maybe not going to, well, I'll just walk through the rest of these. But just a whole bunch of selections, flooring features. There's the carpet colors, linoleum on the kitchen. That's kind of old school. Cabinet features. Again, it's the same kind of thing. And as I do this, all the information on the right-hand side is nicely getting updated. Okay, so you get the point here. I'll kind of finish this off. Colors for the blinds, interior features, things like a whole bunch of interior features. Some of those got automatically selected. Kitchen. So you get the point. And notice in this case, it's building a price automatically. All right. So this is kind of what we're seeing this is what we wanted to show you related to how the CPQ configurator can be used in conjunction with CSI SyteLine for those kind of companies where your product lends itself to option selection, especially when there's some complexity to it that you want the system to sort of come alongside and do some automation in terms of price calculation, price determination, then doing things like building the bill of material and routing. Okay, so we're going to pause there. That's primarily what I wanted to demonstrate. Emily, I'm going to pause now, and I didn't want to go too long, so we're at about 35 minutes into this. Let's see
All right.
if the folks have any kind of questions.
Yeah, we did get a couple of questions. So just a quick reminder to all of our attendees that if you have a question, we do take them in writing on the webinar toolbar. If you drop down the questions tab on your webinar panel, you can submit your question through the panel. So we did get, the first question is, for web functionality, does it have to be used through the portals module?
For web functionality, well, if you're talking about making it available for people outside of your company, for customers or distributors, the portal or that other tool called Enterprise Quoter are the sort of the tools for that. So those are the standard sort of Infor products that are available for that. If it's more of an internal focus, you don't necessarily have to use the portal. But that's a topic that if we want to sort of have one of our folks to sort of call you and discuss more, that's certainly we can certainly take that on.
Yeah, that might need a little bit of follow-up just to fully understand what the question is asking. So we'll follow up with you after the session. The next question is, if I'm running on-prem, can I run CPQ in the cloud?
Huh. That's an interesting question. Yeah, the answer is yes. I didn't expect that question, but yes, the answer to that, you can run CPQ just as a cloud deployment alone. So if whoever asked that question, if you want us to get into some more of the technical details, the only reason I know that is we have at least one customer that's doing that. But yes, that's absolutely supported.
Excellent. The next question is, if I'm running a third-party CRM like Salesforce, can I launch CPQ from my CRM?
Yeah, we have customers doing that as well. Again, there's some technical things in play. I don't know if JT's on the line, if you could talk a little bit about that, but yes, that's definitely very much so possible.
Okay. JT is attending, but he does not have the ability to speak, but
All right,
that's
well,
okay. And then we have one more question. Can you roll out CPQ incrementally? For example, at first only implementing option selection and pricing determination, then later adding BOM and routing creation.
yeah, that's another good question. Yeah, the answer to that is yes, and in fact, that's actually somewhat commonplace because companies that sort of take this on, this is a big process, a big project. The configurator is very powerful, and a lot of companies want to sort of get some utility out of it sooner rather than later. So for example, they'll take a particular product line and try to build for that and roll that out. And maybe at that point, they're just trying to get a process where they're allowing for smart option selection to price it properly, give their order entry people or even their customers a chance to effectively configure a product, but then later on add on to that with the details that will automate the bill and routing creation. But the bigger point there is it's not uncommon for companies to sort of roll this out incrementally.
All right. That makes sense. And that actually appears to be all of our questions for today. So we'll go ahead and give everyone back a couple of extra minutes in their Friday. But before we wrap up, I just wanted to do a final reminder to let you all know that we have that upcoming webinar, two-part webinar series hosted by Infor. It will feature a panel of cloud deployed customers who moved from on-prem, including a DRI customer talking about their experience and the benefits they've seen. And then the second part will be that demo and a Starbucks gift card. So if you're interested in attending that session, we encourage you to register at decision.com/events. With that, thanks to you, Mike. Thanks to all of our attendees for joining us today. Have a great weekend and a happy Thanksgiving as well.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.